Hello, and welcome to another short box. I am Zeckthar, and this month we will be talking about those sneaky characters known as assassins. Since the beginning of sentient life, there has always been a shadowy figure in the night, lurking in the dark with a knife ready to strike. Throughout history, they have gone by many names: hitmen, butchers, and killers, but the most common is assassin. The basic use of assassins in any empire is to remove unwanted units, or single enemies, usually leaders, through stealth and murder. While some species have schools to teach such skills, such as the Imperium of Man's three main temples, the Calidus, Calexis, and Vindicare, others have built their whole society around it, such as the Drukhari. And then you have some species where it just comes naturally in a select few, such as the Commandos of the Orcs, or the Lictors of the Tyranids. This week, we'll be talking about the vile Drukhari, and in particular, a rather vicious mandrake by the name of Kheradruakh the Decapitator. Now, mandrakes were once Drukhari that had slipped into the realm of shadows and nightmares. No longer a decadent Drukhari, they are something less, and more than their sly brethren. As I mentioned before, the Drukhari as a people rely on subterfuge, stealth, and murder as a means of life. They feast on the fear and pain of their enemies, and while they do have places they call home, one in particular, they are most known for their piratical work, as well as their slaving industry. Mark my words, better to be killed in a raid than be taken as a slave by this vile people. For to be a slave means the rest of your short, miserable life will be spent being tortured to death, so that the Dark Eldar may feast upon your pain and terror. Now I'll explain this all to you to tell you that even the Dark Eldar fear the mandrakes, these masters of murder that live amongst them. The stealth of these murderers are benefited by the fact that they can pull themselves into any region of space-time through another being's shadow, emerging with a sibilant hiss to sink its frigid claws and teeth into flesh. Their ebony skin writhes with blasphemous runes, and their faces shift and flow. One moment, a featureless mask. The next parting reveal a maw filled with sharpened teeth. Mandrakes exist both in real space and a cursed shadow world that may be part of the Immaterium. To fight them is to combat a living shadow. Their flesh is night black and seems to absorb rather than reflect light. Their featureless face shifts like rancid oil, while their hair is the color of splintered bone. Surrounding them is an aura of darkness and cold that saps the strength from all of those with the misfortune of being standing nearby. Often the first sign of an imminent mandrake attack will be the sudden onset of freezing temperatures, flash freezing all the moisture out of the very air. The shapes set into their flesh are Eldari sigils of destruction that pulse with venomous green brilliance when the mandrake feasts upon the terror and pain of its victims. Mandrakes possess the ability to channel those stolen life energies, shaping blasts of blue-white cold fire known as bale blasts that emerge from their taloned hands to freeze their foes in place. When they finally fall upon their terrified prey, they use not only the natural weapons of claw and fang, but also hideous, sickle-shaped blades, similar to the surgical tools beloved of the homunculi. Now, how did such monsters come to be? Well, that is a dark mystery that even the Drukhari don't know. Some say that the mandrakes are descended from those of their species inhabiting the webway, who before the fall of the Eldari engaged in heinous acts of lust with demonic entities of the warp when the lost Eldari Empire was at its most decadent. Me personally, I think that the living shadows are descended from a forbidden Eldari pleasure cult that found its own way to escape the devastation of the fall, fleeing into a nightmare dimension of shadow within the Immaterium, and re-emerging as something no longer quite natural. Now I tell you all of this to explain the beast that is known as Kheradruakh. I speak no lies when I say that of all the mandrakes, the Decapitator is the greatest assassin of them all, and possibly the greatest assassin throughout all of the galaxies. Kheradruakh, whose name is a cruel joke in and of itself, meaning he who hunts heads, has been doing just that since the time of the Horus Heresy. And an imperial historian of little note wrote this chilling description of the mandrake, and I quote, "And behold, there was one among them named Kheradruakh, he who hunts heads, the Decapitator. 1,000 skulls lined his lair. 1,000 lives ended swiftly on his blades. None were safe from the Decapitator, who moved through the shadows like the breeze through the air. No guard could mark his passing, No shield could ward his blows. None could stop him from seeking his prize. How could one name the price of certain death for any foe? I cannot say, but rumor tells of 100 times, 1,000 given over in sacrifice, bartered for the death of yet one single enemy. Well, these heads all face the same way, only the Decapitator can tell you. But all of these heads were once mighty champions, generals, and even kings of every race and species. For 8 millennia, Kheradruakh killed seemingly at random, occasionally joining a real space raid unexpectedly, or working as an assassin for a steep price in souls. He would hunt his prey for decades across a dozen worlds if necessary, lying in wait for weeks to await the perfect moment to strike. He took the heads to his lair, where he stripped them to the bone, smashing those that did not meet his requirements, but adding the few that did to one of the 1,000 niches in his hemispherical walls, each skull still containing an echo of the soul, staring at the same point above the central dais. It is said that when the resurrection of Ulrak, tyrant of Shah Dome, triggered a disjunction that threatened to open the hole in reality in Kheradruakh's lair before the collection was complete, Kheradruakh was disgusted by the part played by the brother kings, Ezurakh and Jakurakh. He had no interest in their rivalry, viewing their thinking as tainted by the goals of outsiders and an affront to the nature of the Elendrak. Kheradruakh killed Ezurakh as he fled in defeat from his brother before returning for Jakurakh as well. Both were judged worthy, finding places directly opposite one another in Kheradruakh's lair. While the conspiracy ended, the fabric between realities was stabilized, though Kheradruakh believed he sensed a stirring on the other side. Now, I have done some digging, and for those of you who have been listening to our voxes about the Salamanders, Kheradruakh actually tangled with the father of the Salamanders, Vulkan himself. The rest of my dictation comes from that time, chronicled by my Mira, a fascinating historian that I applaud. I hope you enjoy his work. Vulkan lowered his hammer, Undrakal, and followed the sound. Darkness fell about him like a cloak, neither comforting nor malevolent. It soon yielded an eerie hemispherical sanctum, a cavern lined with rank upon rank of flensed skulls, their empty eye sockets pointing inward towards their skulking slayer. He squatted atop a mound of heads, some bare to the bone and stained in blood, others with flesh still attached. Their keeper busied himself, rooting amongst his trophies and dexterously skinning them with an immense curved blade. His hair was long, dark, and lank, with 2 bones, impaled crossways through the ragged topknot. Tattered scraps of cloth clung to his frame and wizened limbs, the latter rangy but taut with unnatural strength. Runes marked his skin, glowing dully like sickly emerald. As Vulkan stepped beyond the threshold, Kheradruakh glanced up from his labors. A second pair of arms revealed as his body slowly unfurled. His eyes were hollow pits of fathomless black, promising an eternity of agony. The wretched creature smiled, a repugnant expression, then pointed with a long taloned finger to a gap in his legion of skulls.
"A place for me, Shade,"
said Vulkan calmly.
"I am honored, but shall have to decline. Instead, I will need passage through the gate. I know it is here. You've hidden it behind this shadow. You will reveal it now."
A harsh choking sound haunted the chamber. It took Vulkan a moment to realize it was laughter. All the while, Kheradruakh moved neither his lips nor his limbs, but the air around him crackled, and suddenly he was gone. Vulkan moved fast, raising Undrakal as a long curved blade raked across its haft. He barely saw the Shadestalker. Kheradruakh had vanished almost as he appeared. Vulkan turned to intercept a beheading blow that fell so hard his ears rang. Again, Kheradruakh vanished. A third attack jarred the hammer haft once more. A fourth grazed Vulkan's arm as he raised it in defense. Every blow was a killing strike, aimed at his neck. Kheradruakh did not wound his prey. He slew them outright. A hunter of heads, a decapitator of rare and gruesome talent. And he did not yield to frustration. Patiently, relentlessly, he wore at the primarch, vanishing and reappearing, flitting from shadow to shadow. From above, from below, no direction of attack was barred to him. Slowly, Vulkan began to tire. Fatigue gnawed at him, but whatever evil lurked in this place was draining him too. Souls, he realized. The eyeless sockets of the staring skulls had some anima left. Every one had turned to regard him. Ice coated the Primarch's armor, reaching beyond ceramite and adamantium. The laughter returned, dripped with ancient malice. Kheradruakh sensed the end. "None defy me," he said. "You could not escape my blade forever."
"You should know, Shadestalker," Vulkan said, slightly breathless. "I cannot die, not by your hand."
He had no idea if this was true anymore, but it felt reassuringly bold. Then Vulkan remembered. He remembered the hunters following him into the lair. He remembered an arachnid thing scuttling across the ceiling on 6 rangy limbs. He remembered Kral's head falling from its shoulders, a tribesman face cold and dumbstruck. 8 had made it this far. Many more had entered the rift. None of them had gotten any further. Every warrior of Nocturne died, beheaded. Belgorod had been the last. He had wrapped a cloth around his hunter's spear and doused it with drake spit. The volatile substance gave off a noisome reek and had stung the nostrils. The blade had severed Belgard's neck just as he lit the rag and fire, and light flared ferociously. "Belgorod," uttered Vulkan, provoking a moment's hesitation from Kheradruakh. Does he remember that name? Wondered Vulkan. The one who hurt him? The Primarch's fingers traced the ancient sigils wrought into the haft of the hammer. He shut his eyes as he found one engraved into an icon of a blazing sun. His last glimpse, that of a spider descending.
"You never did like the light."
The blinding flare fashioned into Undraka's head exploded into searing magnesium brightness. Kheradruakh shrieked in agony, the scent of the withering old flesh burning in the fetid air. Eyes still closed, Vulkan swung with Undraka and heard the crunch of bone. Daring to look, half blinded, he saw the hunter of heads scurrying back into the shadows. Vulkan cast the blinding light into the shadow, but the vile thing was gone. Nothing remained in the chamber other than the Primarch himself. That is pretty impressive chronicling, if you ask me. But what happened to he who hunts heads? Well, he still haunts the sleep of many a man, and continues to take their heads to this very day. Pray you are not on that list, for your life has days, not years, left in it. I hope you enjoyed these short voxes about the deadliest murderers in the galaxy. If you liked, please follow, comment, subscribe, and like. So now you may wonder what I'm covering next month on my short voxes. Well, you have to tune in next week when Yuxin and I discuss
The Leagues of Votan.
And, as always,
Until next time, this is Zeckthar, signing off.